And on that note, like especially as we pivot into the conversation in New World, I've been having an absolute blast with the Summer Medley Fair. They've been adding in a lot of content, and they just this last week shown off what is coming next with both the new zone, Brimstone Sands, which from a theming perspective is Egyptian and Roman themed. Apparently it was settled by the Egyptians sometime in the past. There was a war. Rome has also, kind of found this area and has since settled it. So you have a kind of a very, very Colosseum-esque and pyramid-esque kind of joining of these two kind of mythical, in this mythical world together. So from just an aesthetic, like I'm really excited to see this new zone, but to catch Chris up to speed because he hasn't been following the game, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to update him, get his raw reaction and thoughts on this for you guys. You have a new weapon, the Greatsword, two-handed weapon, coming into the game. So this would be the third new weapon that's been added. It has kind of a stance dancing kind of mechanic to it, in which that you have, like if you put on your attacking trees, it's going to make you more vulnerable, but you can do way more damage. And if you use your defensive trees, you can have it and set it up as a tank build. And basically what the people who've played it hands-on is that being that you can slot skills from either tree, if you do a skill that is defensive based, you go into your defensive stance. If you do an offensive skill, you go into your offensive stance. And so it's not like you actually press a button to switch trees, but you literally have that kind of flexibility with it. But they also are introducing an ultimate ability that you equip through a couple different runes. So, but depending on the rune that you equip will give you this ultimate ability that fills up over time and then allows you to do that. So from a build mechanic perspective, you still have the two weapons, and then you have this new ultimate ability. And I think that essentially from a gameplay perspective, beyond the new content they're adding, they're also redesigning their core new player experience, currently up from level 1 to 25 now. So zones are getting some areas and some points of interest and some towns are becoming more city-esque and castle-esque. So they, instead of these kind of like little forts out in the middle of the woods, like, oh, that's now a giant castle town and things like that. So I don't know how yet that's going to play out in the lore. Like, is the world actually upgrading, or are they just gonna be like, and magically castles are here? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Personally speaking, that makes me say I got to get these pages. I got to get the lore stuff and get it logged in to see if it does change, or if they are like, and then over the course of this 1 year, this is all that's changed in the game and the world. And so the update is scheduled to release in October. So my only concern as an avid Final Fantasy fan and New World fan, so please God, let the Final Fantasy update be at the end of the month and the Brimstone Sands be at the beginning of the month, so that way I'm not sitting here going like, and they both came out on the same day. Like that would be my personal nightmare.
When would you guess, if you had to put a guess on it, when do you think the New World one is set to release?
I would say 1 week into October, as long as it's ready. And I could see it going mid October, etc. But if it goes to the end of October, then it goes to the end of October.
So 6.15 was 56 days after 6.1. So 56 days after the launch of 6.2 would put us on the 18th.
Yeah.
I don't see it being shorter than that.
Right.
Because it should not be that much shorter than 60 days anyway, because it's supposed to be 2 months. So the 18th is the earliest that we move into the half patch for to get those Criterion dungeons and all that in Final Fantasy that I know you're excited about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see. I'll figure it out if it ends up being around the same time, but it's going to be, I think, pretty exciting. Now I see Fluppy asking about are they adding in mounts? So 3 kind of key pillars have been identified by the devs. They talked about swimming, mounts, and loadouts. Now, out of those 3, apparently one of those is coming with this update, but they have not yet confirmed that in a public or kind of announced which one it is. Speculation is loadouts, but obviously they've talked about like those other 2 things, and we do not have an ETA or a roadmap for that, but the fast travel improvements that they've made of the game just make it super easy and zippy to get around, because you also technically run faster on roads. So it's like if you run on roads, you're zipping along pretty quickly. Anyway, so in terms of that, like we get like new zone, more content, new dungeon, aka expedition. We've already just got the group finder. New World's gearing up to, I would venture to bet that we'll see a marketing push around this update. And the only thing that we do not know, and that Scott apparently has been teasing, is that they've got a really big announcement to come. and they don't, we don't know what that might be, and also we don't know when that might be. But I think that if there's marketing, if there's this, massive update, new weapon, and then if they want to sit here and talk about their vision for the future, like I think we're going to see a lot. Like we've already seen the numbers of New World continue to go up and up and up. Like people are returning, people are enjoying that, and then in fact that's actually one of the most searched things. Like, should you return to New World? And people are like, hey, I'm back. And so you play casually, and I obviously am like the nut. Like you play Guild Wars 2, like I play, you play New World like I play Guild Wars 2. Like it's like, yes, I have characters there. I spend time there, but I'm not like there all the time. Right. Based off of what I just told you, what questions come to your mind? What concerns come to your mind? What would get you to actually recommend this game to your brothers? Because that's actually one of the key litmus tests that I actually have for New World when it comes to would your brothers actually come and enjoy it?
So my brothers are PvP driven. And so one of the problems with PvP is it is tied to their kind of like faction system. Anybody that remembers Final Fantasy way back, you used to only be able to PvP with your grand company before you could kind of do that mercenary stuff. In WoW, there is Alliance versus Horde. Until they started doing battle groups and things like that, that could get wildly skewed and could really kind of screw you. And so within New World, they've kind of tied themselves to this system as opposed to something like Guild Wars, where that's just like World v World gets a little goofy too, but the smaller PvP doesn't. So I would say for PvP, how are they kind of handling that as far as player population, as far as balance? I had heard a whole bunch of stuff about people kind of manipulating and griefing that system, where there was like territory taking, where people were doing mass reports and all sorts of, there were just horror stories. And then with these server merges, and I get paid out. Do I want to be paid out? They incentivize that too much, then I want to be paid out. But then if they don't incentivize it enough, now I just feel like you just took my territory for nothing, and it's just eminent domain. So, as a game that's surged in popularity, fallen in popularity, surged in popularity, as the fact that they've tied it to multiple smaller servers instead of one big mega server, how do you balance PvP?
So they've addressed this to some degree. Whether it ends up being successful, we have yet to see, because these updates haven't been made live. So territory control is kind of one of the key aspects that you're kind of hinting at. Now, in terms of OPR and 3v3 arenas, they've actually done a lot of work. But the problem we've seen in terms of balance is that the meta really has shifted to, you want to be in lightweight armor because it's you take no damage dodging. If you can dodge out of bad and rather than taking heavy, but they appear to have been updating that, and we've seen them test out, like on the PTR and on this kind of media tour they did, was the heavy armor. Like, okay, yes, you can actually be competitive in a different variety of kind of loadouts. But territory control, they're looking at, because the problem they actually have right now with it isn't the changeover. It's that we have all this concept of shell companies. And so they're looking at kind of addressing the shell company issue, which has been within the community a major concern, because they basically have been locking out people from participating in the content. So it hasn't been a matter of balance. It just has been a matter of like a couple of, well-organized groups have prevented anybody else from being able to participate. Now, whether what they do is successful or not has yet to be seen. But in terms of that, though, they are actually adding in leaderboards for both PvP and PvE. That could be good and or bad. When it comes down to, hey, we were able to do X, Y, and Z, like that's where you could see some kind of toxicity, just decide to kind of pop its head in and go from there. When it comes down to the content itself and the mega servers, that's actually one of the problems that I'm kind of curious to see what happens in the longest time. Is what happens with the servers, because right now server queue times are a thing. Again, people are coming back. You sometimes have to wait in the evenings. If this update brings more people back, will they spin up new servers? And they have been talking about bringing in cross server play for like the dungeons and for PvP and for all of these things. But we still do not have an ETA on when that actually happens. So even if they spin up new servers, it does run the risk of them having to scale those back down. But I don't think actually like all of these are like technical problems that I think can and will be solved in the future. The question is that, like if you're not up for that kind of growing pains, then yeah, this would not be the time to return. But if you are interested in being heard and having and driving that kind of feedback, the devs are like actively listening, and we're seeing so much of the player feedback actually make its way into the game, which has been having real positive results. Because when New World launched, it was kind of like, this is the vision we have for the game, and then it was like, okay, well, we need to have a better dialogue, and they were able to kind of get into that groove.
So that's going to be a big one. My brothers are very PvP focused. The next is like, how hard is it to get in and be relevant, right? And so like server queues does answer a portion of that.
Mm-hmm.
But like when it comes to, you know, you both want something that's long time running. So on the long time running, I ask like, when are they going to announce an expansion, and how far out will they announce it, and how often are they going to do expansions? As far as like big waves of content in addition to these constant updates. And then on the shorter form, how are they going to address the new player experience? Because Guild Wars, Final Fantasy, and World of Warcraft in the last year, through 3 different methods, have all 3 addressed or begun addressing their new player experience, but all 3 let it get to a point where it was a chronic, deep cutting problem before any of the 3 of them addressed it in a wide scale method, which means they actively pushed players off. In a game that's 6 months old, it's easy to hop in because nobody's more than 6 months ahead of you. But in the case of 14 or WoW, who's 15 years old, I think, 2004. So older than that. I don't know. They're old. Practically, they can vote in some countries, I think. And so and Final Fantasy, who is just celebrating their anniversary right now with the Rising. Guild Wars celebrating their 10th anniversary right now. Speaking of Final Fantasy, it does look like somebody got their P8. Esclair looks like a Japanese group. And it's Wednesday, so I guess answer those questions.
Good. Congratulations to the PSA. We actually have that going on. Like, there it is. We have that alert in Chris's house to celebrate the P8S clear. To answer that question, because you bring up a lot of really good, interesting points, because that's something that I have not gone hands-on with it, but with this update, they're having a brand new player experience. And they say that the new player experience that they're building that's going to come into play with this update is actually going to take you 1 to 25. And then they said they're going to look at the feedback and how people respond to that. And then they're going to take the 26, and who knows, maybe 26 to 50, or maybe they do 26 to 60. I don't know what the next phase of that plan is, but they're talking about kind of addressing that as that onboarding, which has me excited as a longtime player of this game, because that's actually one of the biggest kind of feedbacks that a lot of people have, especially when it comes down to even new servers, right? Like, people want, and I've actually heard people like they want a new server to be created so that they can have that initial land rush experience like it was at launch, with obviously all the changes. And that actually could go hand in hand with a new player experience that could be well received, but you got to have cross world, in my mind, to have that sustainable. Because if you get isolated off on your own server, you know, like, that could be fun, that might not be fun. You want to make sure you have access to the content. But the fact that they're reworking the new player experience is going to be something that's going to be interesting. Feedback is going to be critical in all of that, and then based off of that, they're going to then take it to, they have already confirmed and said they're going to, I think, basically look at the whole experience. And when you play the story, when you beat the Tempest Heart, which is the current end game story, or how the story of the MSQ kind of finishes, right? You finish the Tempest Heart, a beautiful and amazing cutscene plays, and you're like, that is really cool. It really kind of finishes off this story. Why isn't that also throughout? And I'm wondering to see if within the 1 to 25, if they start kind of bringing in that kind of style of storytelling, because you do have a story, but you have to go find the story. And yes, you have the Soul Wardens thing that takes you from place to place, etc. But if they actually have that hook come in early on and people kind of respond to that, I think you could end up having this like really beautiful narrative experience that sets itself up for like further chapters and kind of sets a standard for how they decide to tell stories. It's not in game. It's drawn, it's animated, etc. But it's like they've put in like a lot of work.
Cutscene?
Yeah, exactly.
The early Guild Wars cutscenes were more drawn.
Yeah, drawn, but it's not like two characters talking side by side. It's like, okay, and then it's kind of narrated, and you know, it's, you know, hey,
some are like the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows. Like there's this like animated kind of sketchy. That's exciting. I mean, those are the big things that I think are going to make it hard to evangelize to people who have been kind of, you know, time is limited, and you know, resources are limited, whether it be or money or the amount of time you can spend gaming or whatever. And so why should I pick up this game as opposed to every other game that is also doing really well?
Right.
There's a lot of beautiful gaming experiences available right now and on the horizon. And so we've got to decide what to do until Ashes of Creation comes in and solves everything for us, and is the greatest game of all time.
I still think I think Alpha 2 for Ashes drops next year. Like, I still feel like Ashes is a while away, especially because they just like tripled the size of their world. You know, it's like, hey guys, yeah, we're excited, and here's the world's just gotten 3 times
I hope
larger.
that game is good.
I really do too. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, I'm sad to see the memes die, but I hope the world is good.
The Throne of Liberty also is on the horizon for next year. That's rumored to be published by Amazon. Amazon's really leaning into MMOs. Like,
somebody said that the Star Citizen's been kind of their main game lately, and so it's been neat to see that move into a state where it's becoming more playable.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, why would you play New World? I think one of the things is when you actually do, it feels there's something there. Like, I think that when you talk to many people, when you, like, anybody I've talked to, even if they've quit the game, they end up, like, I always get the expression that, like, there's something here. Like, you can feel it, like, almost immediately when playing the game itself. And then the question ends up being, like, you know, we saw with Scott, like, saying, like, yeah, they were playing, they ran into a bug, you know, within the quest line. And it's like, oh man, like, as that stuff gets refined and fixed out, like, I think essentially what New World does have going for it, and the reason why people should check it out, at least, especially if they already own it, there's no sub. Like, it's like, it is one of the best monetized games, you know, in terms of a fairness and you know, setup. That is like, just update it, check it out, see if it actually is hitting the notes that you felt like it hit. And so there's still things and still work that needs to be done, but it's really interesting to see. And I think if anything else, especially as Amazon looks to build out their own MMOs as well in other games, like, this is just gonna be massive amounts of data for them to kind of say, like, you know, by the time whatever else is next, by the time, you know, like, when we look back here in a couple years, it's like, I don't know, there's a special joy that I had when I played 1.0. And it's interesting to kind of talk to players who've come into Final Fantasy 14 at whatever expansion, and then literally go like, gosh, I kind of wish I was there now. And that's essentially kind of like where I'm like, guys, New World's going to be around for quite a while. And just like how they're refining the new player experience, a part of me is like, I'm glad I had the experience I've had. I'm actually interested in seeing what the experience has been evolving to. And I'm excited that here in, you know, 5 years and 10 years, that I'll be able to sit here and be like, yeah, like, it was this crazy experience. Like, you know, some stuff would just randomly break, and then some stuff was like, holy crap, like, that was really ridiculously fun. Like, I can, you know, and that's where I think where it comes down to, New World has a unique hook to it. Not that it's perfect, not that any game is, but it's definitely going to be, I think, one of the, like, when we look at like top 5 MMOs here in a couple years, I think New World easily makes the top 5.
Well, that's exciting. They've definitely got the backing of a company big enough to see it out that long.
They got enough money for day. Like, they own the servers.
But like, that doesn't always solve it, right? Like,
No.
you know, we've seen plenty of big companies drop projects whenever they feel like it, because they don't need it to succeed. So like, there is something to be said, like, at least with an indie studio, it's ride or die.
Yeah.
And so you know, big companies have enough to see it into the horizon, but they also have the ability to say, like, I don't need to make money off this.
Yeah.
So that at any point, I think it's just not fun or profitable for us to keep managing this, they could just shut it down.